All right, so get this, Diablo 4, Season 7. We are going deep on the Season of Witchcraft.
Ooh, sounds spooky.
Yeah, it's going to be a wild ride through Sanctuary for sure.
Yeah, I'm ready. Hit me with it. What's changed?
Well, first, just a quick one for anyone who might not know. Diablo 4, it's an action RPG, or ARPG for short. You're basically this super powerful demon slayer battling hordes of hellspawn, collecting epic loot, you know?
Yeah, getting strong.
Becoming powerful enough to make even Elon Musk jealous.
Yeah.
And get this, he's actually a Diablo fan.
Haha, that's awesome. It's true, though. These games, they really tap into that desire for constant improvement, right?
Yeah.
Always chasing that next upgrade, honing your skills, pushing further and further into the depths of hell.
So true. Okay, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Season 7, what's new? First off, the Season of Witchcraft theme. We're talking creepy quests, missing heads, and a whole new set of powers.
Missing heads. Okay, now I'm intrigued.
Right. Apparently the Tree of Whispers, it's lost its heads, like literally. We need to find them.
Wait, so we're collecting heads to get powers?
Basically. And these powers, they're inspired by the Witch Doctor from Diablo 2. What's really cool is that they're not tied to a specific class.
Oh, interesting. So any class can use any of these witchcraft powers.
Exactly. So you can experiment with all sorts of new builds and playstyles. Like, imagine a barbarian summoning a plague of locusts.
Oh, that'd be insane. Or what about a sorcerer conjuring a wall of thorns?
Dude, the possibilities, it's going to shake things up big time. But how do we actually find these missing heads?
That's where the headhunts come in. They're basically special zones, each with their own unique objectives. And rewards, of course. You'll be battling tough bosses, solving puzzles based on whispers from the missing heads, and collecting these things called roots.
Roots, what are those? Like literal roots?
It's a bit of a mystery, to be honest. Some contain valuable crafting materials, or gold. Others might lead you to hidden areas with powerful enemies, or even unique events. It really adds an element of surprise, encourages exploration, which is always a good thing in an ARPG.
Always. I love a good treasure hunt. But back to those witchcraft powers for a sec. Are they all equally powerful, or are there some we should be on the lookout for?
Well, there's this one called Pernado, and it's causing quite a stir in the community. Incredibly powerful, apparently. But here's the catch. You can only find it randomly in the world.
Oh, so it's like finding a legendary item, but for powers. That's a cool way to keep things exciting. Randomness is good.
Exactly. Keeps players engaged long term. You might be farming a dungeon for gear, but in the back of your mind, you're always hoping for that Pernado drop.
Smart move by the developers, for sure. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. How does this new season impact the different classes? We've got the Barbarian, Sorcerer, Rogue, Druid, Necromancer, and Spiritborn. How are they each affected by these witchcraft powers?
That's where things get really interesting. Because any class can use any witchcraft power. It just opens up a ton of build possibilities.
So it's not just about finding the most powerful power.
Nope. It's about finding the ones that best synergize with your chosen class and build. It adds a whole new layer of strategy to the game.
Love it. Customization is key.
Totally. And on top of that, each class is getting its own set of balance changes and updates in Season 7. For example, the Druid Spirit Generation. It's been improved, which could make their werebear form much more viable in high-level content.
Oh, nice. I've always loved the werebear playstyle.
Yeah.
But yeah, it did feel a bit underpowered compared to some other builds.
Right. So this could be a big deal for Druid players. Then you've got the Rogue. Their shadow clone ability is getting some much-needed attention, becoming a more potent tool for both damage and distraction. Could really shake up the Rogue meta.
Ooh, some deadly shadow clone builds on the horizon, especially with the right witchcraft powers to enhance them.
Absolutely. And then, of course, we have the Necromancer, always a favorite. One notable change is a bug fix related to how their alternate weapon scales.
Ah, those bug fixes, sometimes they have the biggest impact.
Right. This one, seemingly minor, could have significant ramifications for their overall power level. It's like uncovering a hidden gem in the patch notes. And speaking of hidden gems, let's talk about the Spiritborn class. They've received some adjustments, but they still remain a force to be reckoned with. Their unique playstyle, centered around channeling spirits, continues to be highly effective, especially in endgame content.
So for players who are all about maxing out power, Spiritborn might still be the top pick.
It's a safe bet, for now at least, but The beauty of Diablo 4 is that the meta is constantly evolving. With the witchcraft powers and class changes, who knows what unexpected builds might rise to the top.
That's what keeps it fresh.
So exciting.
So exciting. Oh, and speaking of shaking things up, Season 7 is also introducing a feature that a lot of players have been waiting for, the Armory system.
Oh yeah, the Armory.
Big deal, right? For those who might not know, can you explain what it is and why it's such a game changer?
Absolutely. It basically allows players to save and swap between multiple builds effortlessly. Think of it like having different loadouts for your character, each one tailored for a specific purpose.
So instead of manually changing skills, gear, Paragon points every time you want to switch playstyles, you just load up a pre-made build from the Armory.
Boom! Exactly. It streamlines the whole process, and it makes experimentation so much more accessible.
That's huge. Imagine having one build for speed leveling, another optimized for Nightmare Dungeons, and another focused on farming specific items.
You got it. It's like having the right pool for the job. And what's even better, swapping between builds in the Armory is completely free.
No cost. That's amazing. It really encourages players to get creative, try new things, without having to worry about wasting resources.
Right. Experiment to your heart's content. Explore the depth of the build possibilities in Season 7. The Armory is a testament to how Diablo 4 is evolving as a live service game.
Listening to player feedback for sure. Now, I know there's been a lot of talk about how Season 7's changes are bringing Diablo 4 closer to its predecessor, Diablo 3. Specifically, those themed seasonal powers, like witchcraft.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Game design, it often comes full circle. Diablo 4 initially tried to distance itself from some of Diablo 3's core mechanics, but now, with Season 7, we're seeing a return to some of those familiar elements.
It's like finding that sweet spot between innovation and those beloved features that made Diablo 3 so popular.
Exactly. And in the end, it's the players who benefit. We get the best of both worlds.
The fresh ideas of Diablo 4 combined with those tried-and-true mechanics that made the franchise so iconic. Love it. Now, how does Diablo 4 stack up against the competition? We've got other awesome ARPGs out there, Path of Exile 2, Last Epoch, each with their own unique strengths. How does Diablo 4 stand out?
It's a tough crowd, but I think Diablo 4 strikes a really nice balance between depth and accessibility. Its systems are complex enough to offer plenty of build diversity and strategic decision-making, but they're also presented in a way that's relatively easy to grasp, even for newcomers.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of its biggest strengths, that classic Diablo feel.
Yeah.
The satisfying loot, the visceral combat. But it's also modernized and refined to appeal to a wider audience.
Totally. And Season 7 just enhances that appeal. The witchcraft powers, the armory system, quality of life improvements. It's clear the developers are committed to making Diablo 4 the ultimate ARPG experience.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. The new witchcraft powers, how they impact the different classes, the game-changing armory system, even compared Diablo 4 to its competition. But now, I'm curious, how do you think all these changes in Season 7 will ultimately affect the way people play Diablo 4?
That's a great question. I think the biggest shift will be in the level of experimentation and build diversity. The armory system makes it so easy to swap between builds, and the witchcraft powers, well, they just offer a whole new set of options. Players are going to be way more inclined to try different things, push the boundaries of what's possible.
You think we'll see some unexpected builds rise to the top?
Absolutely. I think so. It's going to be a dynamic meta, constantly evolving, which is what makes ARPGs like Diablo 4 so captivating.
I love it. It's like a whole new world of possibilities is opening up in Sanctuary. So much to explore.
Exactly. That sense of discovery, that's what's going to define Season 7. Players experimenting, theory crafting, sharing their findings. It's going to be awesome.
All right, so we've set the stage for our deep dive into Diablo 4 Season 7. Explored the major changes, discussed the impact, compared it to the competition. But now it's time to really roll up our sleeves and get into the nitty-gritty details.
Let's do it. Time to dive deeper into the specifics of each class, analyze the potential of the armory system, and really dissect those Season 7 batch notes.
I'm ready to unearth those hidden gems. Let's continue our deep dive.
Okay, so let's dig into some of those juicy details. Remember those nightmare dungeons? We touched on them earlier.
Yeah. Those sound pretty intense.
Well, they are, and they're getting some tweaks this season. So understanding how they work, especially with this new armory system, it's going to be crucial for efficient progression.
All right, so Nightmare Dungeons 101. For those of us who haven't ventured into these yet, what are they exactly? And why should we care?
Think of them as like amped up versions of regular dungeons, deadlier enemies, more challenging affixes, and of course better rewards. It's the ultimate proving ground for your build.
So that's where you go to really test your limits, see if your character can handle the heat.
Exactly. And with the armory system now, you can actually tailor your build specifically for nightmare dungeons. Like, you could have one setup focused on just raw damage to melt through bosses, while another setup, maybe it prioritizes survivability, crowd control, for navigating those treacherous corridors, the ones packed with elite enemies.
So it's like having the right tool for the job. You wouldn't bring a butter knife to a gunfight.
Exactly. And you wouldn't bring a glass cannon build into a nightmare dungeon swarming with crowd control. Speaking of optimization, though, one thing players really need to understand this season is the importance of stat breakpoints.
Okay, breakpoints. Now that sounds kind of technical. Break it down for me. What are they, and why should we care about them?
Think of them like thresholds for your character's stacks. Reaching certain values for specific stats, it can actually result in significant jumps in performance. It's not just about stacking as much of a certain stat as possible.
There are sweet spots.
Yes. You want to aim for those sweet spots to maximize effectiveness. For example, let's say you've got a barbarian who's focused on whirlwind attacks, hitting certain attack speed breakpoints. That can drastically increase their clear speed in those nightmare dungeons.
Makes sense. So it's not just about brute force, it's about strategy too.
Strategy is key. And with all the class changes, A&D, the new witchcraft powers this season, those breakpoints, they might shift. Players need to experiment, find the optimal stat allocations for their builds. It's going to be crucial.
All right, so we've got nightmare dungeons, we've got breakpoints. What other gameplay mechanics should we be aware of heading into Season 7?
Well, there's one that's been core to Diablo 4 since launch, and it's only becoming more important with this new season. It's called Lucky Hit.
Oh, Lucky Hit. I remember seeing that pop up, yeah. But I never fully grasped how it works.
So Lucky Hit basically adds an element of chance to your attacks. Certain abilities, items, they have a chance to trigger additional effects on a successful hit.
Oh, interesting.
It could be anything: healing yourself, stunning an enemy, generating resources, you name it.
So every attack is kind of like a gamble.
In a way, yeah. It keeps things exciting. And with all the new witchcraft powers and legendary items coming in Season 7, we can expect some seriously creative lucky hit effects. Imagine a witchcraft power with a chance to summon a spectral wolf every time you crit, or a legendary item that triggers chain lightning on a lucky hit. Endless possibilities.
Wow. I'm already theory crafting in my head. But let's talk about actually getting those builds up and running, leveling up quickly in Season 7. Any tips for those of us who want to hit that endgame content ASAP?
Well, if you've got a high-level friend, there's that classic power leveling strategy, still works wonders. They can clear an area called the pit, and you, as the low-level character, just stand nearby and soak up the experience points. It's like the Diablo version of getting carried, haha.
Oh yeah, the good old power leveling trick.
Never fails.
But what about going solo? What are some efficient ways to level up if we're on our own?
You want to focus on the main campaign quests. And exploring the world, that's a solid foundation. And keep in mind, even if you do power level to max, you still got to progress through the renown system.
Right. Renown. For unlocking those Paragon points, potion upgrades, all that. Can't skip it.
Nope, it's essential. Now, as you're progressing, starting to tackle those tougher nightmare dungeons, understanding the crafting and farming systems is key. Gathering materials to upgrade gear, re-rolling stats, it can make a world of difference to your overall power.
Okay, so crafting and farming.
Yeah.
Guess no ARPG is complete without a little grind, right?
Haha, that's part of the fun. When it comes to those crafting materials, though, one important tip: salvage those rare items. Don't just vendor them.
Oh, for real?
Salvage them for veiled crystals. Those are a valuable resource. You'll need a ton, especially when upgrading your gear to higher tiers.
Good to know. So salvaging rares, got it. What else?
Keep an eye out for Helltide events. Prime opportunity to snag Forgotten Souls. Those are crucial for enchanting gear, pushing your build to the next level.
Okay, so we're salvaging rares for veiled crystals. We're hitting those Helltide events for Forgotten Souls. Gotta stock up. But let's step back for a sec. Big picture time. We've talked about all these class changes, witchcraft powers, gameplay mechanics. How do you see these elements coming together to shape the overall meta in Season 7?
Well, it's early days, obviously, but I think we're going to see an MUCH more diverse meta compared to previous seasons. The witchcraft powers, the class balance changes, the armory system, it's all going to encourage a ton of experimentation, build creativity. We might see some real underdog builds rise to the top.
Oh, I love that. Unexpected champions emerging. That's what makes it exciting.
Totally. Like, for example, that buff to Druid Spirit Generation, it might actually make werebear builds viable in high-level content. Could shake things up quite a bit. The meta's been pretty dominated by Sorcerer and Necromancer builds lately.
A change is going to be good. It's always fun to see those new playstyles emerge. But I'm curious, with all this talk about builds and optimization, do you ever feel like it takes away from just the simple joy of jumping into Diablo and slaying demons?
You know, that's a really good point, and it's something I think about too. While the theory crafting and min-maxing can be fun, it's important to remember why we play these games, right? Sometimes the most fun is just experimenting, trying different skills, seeing what happens.
I agree. Sometimes you just got to embrace the chaos, let the loot dice fall where they may. But speaking of embracing the chaos, I think it's time we dive into those class specifics. Let's break down the changes, the potential builds, and how they might fare in this new Season 7 meta. Where should we start?
Let's start with the Barbarian, the embodiment of raw power and fury in Sanctuary.
All right, barbarians, time to unleash that inner rage. Let's see what Season 7 has in store for them. We've covered a ton about Season 7, witchcraft powers, the armory. But before we wrap things up, I got to ask, what about those little hidden gems in the patch notes? The subtle changes that maybe people aren't talking about?
Oh, for sure. Those can make a big difference. Those tiny tweaks that can lead to, like, crazy synergies and new builds no one's thought of yet.
Exactly. I love those. You're combing through the notes and bam, there it is. Did you see that buff to the Sorcerer's Inferno skill? Enemies in the Inferno, now they're constantly vulnerable.
Oh, yeah. That's going to be huge for some builds, especially the ones that focus on stacking vulnerability for damage. Could be a real game changer.
Totally. Kind of glossed over it at first, but now that you mention it, big potential. What about for our Necromancer fans? Anything good hidden in there for them?
There's a nice little buff to the Lidless Wall Shield. Each active Bone Storm now gives you bonus crit damage, so those bone-hurling builds. Even more potent.
Turning those bone storms into a crit fest, that's going to be awesome. I can already picture the damage numbers flying.
It's a beautiful thing. Really shows why it's worth digging into those patch notes. Those under-the-radar changes, they can completely transform how you play.
It's like, you're in this massive dungeon focused on the giant treasure chests. But sometimes the real gems are tucked away in those little corners. You got to be paying attention.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And while we're on the topic of treasures, let's not forget the ultimate prize for any Diablo player, those Uber Uniques.
Oh, yeah. Uber Uniques. Got to get those. For anyone who's not in the know, what makes those items so special?
Think of legendary items, but dialed up to 11. They have unique affixes, abilities, stuff you won't find anywhere else. And in Season 7, getting them, it's going to involve some seriously tough boss fights.
Oh, like who are we talking?
Farshawn, Gregoire, the Beast in the Ice, even Andariel herself makes a comeback. These are not pushovers.
No kidding. These are those endgame encounters. You got to be on point with your build, your execution, and maybe have a bit of luck on your side, right?
You got it. You got to master your class, optimize your gear, coordinate with your party if you're running with one, and maybe say a little prayer to RNGesus. The rewards are worth it, though. Those Uber Uniques. Top tier.
Give us a taste. What kind of insane powers do these things have?
Okay, so imagine this. Tempest Roar. It's a unique druid helm, gives you unlimited spirit during your Cataclysm ultimate. Basically, you become an unstoppable force of nature.
Whoa. Okay, that sounds pretty wild.
Yeah. Or how about Deathless Visage for the Necromancer? Boosts your Bone Spear crit damage.
Yeah.
A&D creates these explosive echoes that just wreck everything.
Okay, I'm sold. Uber Uniques, here I come. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into Diablo 4 Season 7, what's the big takeaway? What should our listeners be most hyped about?
I'd say this season is all about experimentation, discovery, pushing the limits of what's possible in Sanctuary. The witchcraft powers, the armory, all the changes they've made Diablo 4 more dynamic and exciting than ever.
It's like a brand new chapter is opening up. We all get to write our own legends,
Exactly. So jump in, explore those new builds, conquer those dungeons, and most importantly, have fun.
Love it. And don't forget to check out the show notes for all the resources we talked about. Patch notes, class guides, builds, tier lists, everything you need to dominate Season 7.
Happy demon hunting, everyone.
Until next time, may your loot be legendary, your skills sharp, and your victories glorious.